Hey, Shepherd family, this is Pastor Scott Seidler with another installment of our Shepherd podcast. You know, in 2020 at Shepherd, we went through a digital transformation where because of COVID, we had to plot a new and innovative course of ministry. While for a time our in-person ministry was shut down, it offered us the opportunity to stand up a new ministry of online engagement, not just with our current Shepherd family, but also with a vision of reaching into new homes, households, families, circles of influence, and inviting them to become part of our Shepherd family. Not just, by the way, here in Scottsdale, Phoenix, but indeed throughout our country and across the globe. Today, I'm joined by our new Director of Digital Mission, John Karolus, who is going to be joining us this year and leading us in how we reach out in mission, in service, in insight and gospel ministry to our Scottsdale, Phoenix community, and certainly beyond this region as well. John is a 2020 graduate of St. Louis Seminary, Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. He's currently getting a second advanced degree there. We look forward to his ministry among us here in Scottsdale. John, welcome to our Shepherd podcast, and most importantly, welcome to our Shepherd family as a new staff person here. As you put the final touches on packing for your trip to Scottsdale, how are things up in Wisconsin where you currently call home?
Thanks for having me. It's an exciting time. It's a joyful time. Things up here are, as you would expect, cold and snowy. Although today was a highlight, it got up to the upper 20s, which means that some of the snow looked like it was thinking about melting a little bit. But really looking forward to the change in climate between you and me, and looking forward to the work going to be done out in Scottsdale.
Hey, you know, you've been preparing for ministry for a long time through college and seminary, but there's a deeper tradition of faith and ministry that has raised you, has brought you to the dance. Talk a little bit about how it is you got into the ministry and really what your family of ministry is like. I think our Shepherd family would be interested to hear about that background.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me paint a picture of my immediate family first and foremost. So I'm one of four kids. My parents raised us and gave us a great example of a happy and caring marriage and a loving marriage. My dad is a pastor, a Lutheran pastor up here in Antigo, Wisconsin at Peace Lutheran Ministries. And my mom is a director of donor relations for a Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod North Wisconsin district camp called Camp Luther. And they've been in ministry their whole careers. My mom was a Lutheran school teacher in the past as well. And between the four of us, my two older sisters, one is a DCE in Gainesville, Florida. Stephanie, my sister Rebecca, is a deaconess graduate from the seminary, and her husband is a fourth-year seminary student in St. Louis. And my younger brother, Josh, he is an Air National Guard avionics technician. He's finishing up his training over in Wichita Falls, Texas, and will be in Milwaukee moving forward. So that's my immediate family. And of course, we learned firsthand what church work meant, what it meant to be up in front, as it were, whether it be my dad in front of the congregation or at our last church, you know, we were little kids sitting up in the front pew so that we couldn't get too far away. You know, parents would box us in if we needed some corrective instruction.
Right. You know, I was preaching this past weekend, and I saw my 14-year-old son out in the congregation. And of course, you know, my kids have watched me preach throughout their entirety of their lives, but it's interesting to now be preaching not just to a 5-year-old little boy or a 10-year-old little boy, but a 14-year-old who's starting to think about high school and college and career and everything else. What was that like for you and your siblings, you know, watching your dad through the years? How did your perception of your dad's ministry work change through the years? Does that make sense? I mean, you see him and he's the pastor, so you don't know any different, but at some point in time, I'd imagine you had to toggle over and realize, man, this guy's got kind of a weird job. He stands up in front of people and he talks and people just listen. Talk a little bit about that experience of growing up in a place of the father and a mom who were influencing people spiritually.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're really little, of course, you just think everybody's life is the same. So I didn't realize that, everybody's dad wasn't a pastor, so,
Right.
And it was, it was joyful. One of the blessings of ministry is oftentimes the congregation is loving and supportive. And so, around the holidays, we get baked goods maybe dropped off, or a few extra Christmas presents. And of course, so that was pretty nice. That was pretty exciting. But then as time went on, we started to realize, why is Dad going to the hospital in the middle of the night, or what's this, what's this about him not being able to come home for dinner, and all those kinds of things. But through it all, I will give my parents a lot of credit. They really prioritized family time and prioritized work-life balance, but also taught us a deep reverence for what it meant to have that role in people's lives as a spiritual leader, as a community leader. And so it's been interesting. But now, now I'll email my dad a copy of my sermon and ask him what he thinks. And he doesn't quite send his emails, his sermons email to me yet. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point, where giving him the review. But no, it's been a joy. It's been a blessing, really. And they always seem to handle a lot of those stresses really well, and we're very open with us about whether plans needed to change or all these different things. So it's been good.
I love it. This morning, at Shepherd, even if we're in a pandemic, we're still receiving new members that are becoming part of our Shepherd family. The very nature of living in Phoenix and Scottsdale means that we have a whole lot of people who are transplanting here. There are very few natives. Native Phoenicians. I understand that we call ourselves, now that we live in Phoenix, we're Phoenicians, so that sounds kind of exotic. But Alexis and Barry are newer members of our congregation with their kids, and they come from as I was listening in, a Greek Orthodox and a Catholic background. And one of the things I celebrated with them as they were sharing that was the truth that wherever you come from, you're always transporting into our Shepherd family traditions, customs, habits, disciplines, sensitivities, nostalgia, sentiment, all those kinds of things that make our memories of childhood rich and deep. And certainly, when you grow up in a church family, in a church tradition, it's not like you're just going to church once a month. You're going to church like every Sunday, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on if you've got to play up in the choir loft or in the balcony with the instrumental ensemble. What are some of the traditions, habits, disciplines that you were taught that were part of the Karolus household growing up that are just naturally and wonderfully going to be part of your ministry, not only here at Shepherd, but as you think about going forward in ministry through the years of your life ahead? What are those traditions and disciplines that make you a Karolus as opposed to a Seidler or a Rosenau or a Pastor Jake Wampler, our other 2 pastors here at Shepherd of the Desert?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things over the years. One thing, I've been a part of 3 different churches growing up because of, Dad taking other calls, moving around a little bit. So we experienced different church communities that had their different traditions and their different styles of doing things. And this church that we've been at now for 15, 16 years really became sort of the ingrained normalcy that we got used to. It was our formative years, middle school, high school, college. This was the place we came home to. And so whether it be the soup dinner between holiday services on Christmas Eve, or, those Wednesday nights in Advent and in Lent where the choir and the liturgy or the church leaders, have to get together between services to have that meal. Those are always special times, as well as getting able to having the opportunity to help out with services, whether it's acolyting in middle school or ushering when we got into high school, and being a part of that welcoming group committee that opened the doors to the church and handed people those bulletins back when we handed each other things,
Right.
So it's a lot of different things, opening gifts on Christmas Eve rather than Christmas Day because I got to get up and get to church on time, So those eves when after a long day of doing services at church for my dad or for my mom, or if we were in the choir or the music, as you mentioned, always, had some fancy hors d'oeuvres, maybe, shrimp and cocktail sauce being those fancy hors d'oeuvres, right? But it would kind of be those opportunities to celebrate as a family what we had been celebrating as a church community. And so that I remember those fondly over the years, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, after church, coming home and sitting down and doing our gifts. So that's some of those little traditions that have kind of been passed on throughout the years.
I love that. One of the connective threads that I heard in that answer that you just gave was the thread of community. It's one thing to do ministry. It's another thing to do ministry with a strong sense of community, of relationship. Pastor's family with choir members, instrumental ensemble, ushers, even the altar guild, for goodness sakes. But that sense and spirit of camaraderie. And here at Shepherd, if I think about our Shepherd family, that spirit of community, that desire for spiritual camaraderie is really a deep value for us. Again, in part because so many people are transplants here. They came to Scottsdale, they came to Phoenix, really not knowing anybody, enjoying the weather, enjoying the beauty of the Sonoran Desert. But at the same time, looking for a place to call home. In the absence of their family, maybe back in Wisconsin or Montana or Minnesota, upper Midwest kinds of things, to have a family here. And so we're really looking forward for you to be part of that family. And that's why we use that phrase, Shepherd family, so often, is because it's not just an easy way to talk about our community, but it really gets at that value of we want to be brothers and sisters, moms and dads, in some cases, grandma and grandpa, for folks that are coming in and maybe a little bit orphaned and isolated from their biological families back wherever it is that they came from. But, John, beyond just that kind of communal sense and that spiritual background that you have, you also bring with you something that is absolutely exciting for us here at Shepherd, and that is your generational moment. You're in your mid-20s, and you bring a generational insight to our Shepherd family here in Scottsdale that I just turned 50. I don't have. Pastor Rose now is a little bit older than I shan't mention his age, but he does not have. Pastor Jake, a little bit younger than me, actually a lot younger. You guys are pretty close in age, but talk a little bit about your generational moment, and especially talk about the insight that you carry with you, knowing that you're going to be in ministry for the next 40 years of your life, and you will walk through some of the biggest generational changes to church that Western Christianity has ever known. Can I set up the question any more apocalyptically? I mean, holy cow. Just talk about what are you seeing in your generational moment in your mid-20s about where church is going and what's on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that plays into some of that calling that I felt really more so recently in these final years at seminary, where it was like very clear to me that this is what God was calling me to. And that was set up over the course of several experiences over the years, starting out probably in college when I was introduced to a community of people that that weren't all part of some sort of church body, some sort of church congregation. In this, in the town I'm in now, or when I went to high school, it's a town of 8,000. So a third of them were Lutheran, a third of them were Catholic, a third of them were some other Protestant, and maybe 5% didn't have any connection to a church. And so in college, even though I went to a Lutheran school, that community sort of blew up quite a bit, and it was, maybe one out of every three weren't involved in church or had a spiritual community. And I didn't see that, at the time necessarily until I could reflect on it. But in college, I had the opportunity to do some mission work in Guatemala, actually, just a couple spring break mission trips. And that led to a summer in Guatemala, and volunteering down there at that age. I was 21, I think. and
Wow.
seeing the role that the churches and the pastors played in the community, in the lives of the people that worshiped with them, was extremely eye-opening to me, and helped me to see the relevance of a spiritual leader that I didn't necessarily know, probably because I took it for granted in my youth, in my younger days. And out of those college years, out of that more diverse community, into seminary, where sure, I was going to school with everyone that was going to be a pastor, right? But I was in a city, I was in St. Louis, that was much larger than anything I had experienced up until that point. I had friends in workplaces that oftentimes they were the only spiritual person in that group, in that community, playing rec sports with people that had no bearing on Christianity or real care for it. Maybe the obligatory Catholic here or there, but it really came to light this summer when I was visiting with a friend of mine. We hadn't seen each other in years, and I was explaining to him what I was up to, what I was going to be doing. And he said, I didn't grow up in a church family. I don't really know what all that means. Can you just tell me, what does a pastor actually do?
Wow.
And, I struggled and stumbled over, having to answer this question. I thought everyone knew the answer to, and then you realize, at that time that we've got to really consider what it is that we're doing here, what we believe, what we think we're doing, and then engage those people that don't have that same recognition of who they are before God and what He wants for them in their lives.
Wow.
And so, as a member of kind of that generation, of that this population of people that's growing up in the world where no spiritualities are taken for granted, no theistic truths, nothing about God is presupposed or anything like that. You just are kind of functioning on the idea that your five senses are going to give you the best information you can have, and you make your way from there. So there's that recognition of the need for spiritual leadership, of the need for the truth, the light shining in a dark world. And I think those things put together are really what it is that pushes me into ministry, and why I see so much we can latch onto at this culture shift that's been ongoing probably since the 80s and the 90s, but most specifically in the late 2010s. Now we're in the 20s. There's a lot of reversals happening. There's a lot of changes, and one thing I love about Shepherd is that you're wanting to be a part of it. You're wanting to lean into it rather than simply survive the changes. How do you ride them? How do you fill your sails with them?
Yeah. It's just that provocative question. Some of the most provocative questions are the simplest ones. And when you get a question like, what do you do as a pastor? It's an extension of another question, which is, what's a ministry? What do you do as a ministry? And, I'll just say for our Shepherd family, as you listen in, this is what we do as a ministry. We find ways with every succeeding generational moment to give answer to the deepest felt needs on people's hearts. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist. You can go on Google or Twitter or Facebook, and you can see what is trending. Who are the celebrities that are trending? What are the events historically that are trending? What are the search topics that are trending? And as pastors, as a ministry, we take those bits of information and data, and we ask the deeper question, how can we minister to a world filled with the Kardashians? How do we minister to a world that is divided and trying to figure out the divide between, those, some who are elected and some who are not? How do we figure out as a ministry what to do in the midst of a pandemic where people are literally, in some cases, scared such that they will not leave their house at all? And so, at Shepherd, just as an aside, this is kind of what we're doing. And, part of our Shepherd ministry, and if you're just tuning into this podcast, is to talk with folks and bring on leadership like John Karolus to help us, chart a new path, a new course. And by the way, if you want to support this ministry financially, you can go to shepherdaz.church. You can make a donation. And that ministry that we have intended to do will become a ministry that is in fact supported by you. And that financial support is not inconsequential. In fact, as we've talked around it, it is essential to doing what we're doing and giving answer to the question, what do you do in ministry? To the question that John was posed, what do you do as a pastor? John, you've had some experience with ministry, and you've led on a little bit, but what are some of the other things that you see, not just about Shepherd, but maybe about Scottsdale, Phoenix, and the Southwest, as you've come to know it? What are some things that are exciting you about ministry here that was maybe particularly attractive for you in this first opportunity for you professionally, even as you're finishing up your pastoral credentialing now at the seminary?
Yeah, I think as I went through my education, picked up a philosophy degree in undergrad and then the Master's of Divinity at the seminary, always was leaning towards orientated towards ministry, towards church work. But I had the opportunity to intern. I served my vicarage during seminary in Boca Raton, Florida, which is not too far from Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and that was a pretty big culture shift, even from St. Louis, especially from Antigo, Wisconsin, and
Right.
there was a connection there where that really was, as I grew into an adult, an individual, my own person. That was where I felt the most at home up to that point, where I felt like I could really, a place like that is where I could put down some roots. And
Sure.
a place like that being a sort of a outer edge of the country, away from sort of the heartland, not only geographically, but also, in the Lutheran world, we're the Missouri Synod. That's where we started. We connected with those other church groups back in the 1800s, and with Ohio, with Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, all those, that's where we're from. And so getting out of that pre-established culture and into a culture where the church doesn't necessarily have roots, where people don't have those generational connections to spiritual communities, where the word Lutheran doesn't even necessarily mean anything to someone that hears it on the street for the first time. Those are huge magnets for me. And so getting to be a part of a congregation, a community where not only is it exciting to be one of the many transplants coming into this new area, but also it's a prestigious, academic town, a couple of large universities and really important healthcare organizations and institutions, a lot of businesses booming in Phoenix and Scottsdale. It's a place that leans forward when it comes to cultural change. And to see that also happening in the congregation is just a great encouragement and an inspiring thing to be a part of.
I just love what you say, and again, your heritage in the Lutheran Church. That's not a small thing for me personally. When I was in seminary or when I was in college, I had the opportunity to choose between 4 different denominations and their pastoral path toward pastoral ministry. And I chose to be a Lutheran pastor for a very particular reason, because the Lutheran Church is unapologetically a church of grace. It's intended to be a church where Jesus Christ is the center, not our moral rectitude, our achievement, not our missional strength, but knowing Jesus as our Lord and Savior. What I've experienced here myself, having grown up in the Midwest, now living obviously in Scottsdale, Phoenix, is that we are surrounded by megachurches, non-denominational churches that have very little connection to classic denominational Christianity. And while on the one side, all these churches are esteemed by God and valued by Him, I am really excited about being unapologetically Lutheran. Grace alone, faith alone, Scripture alone, Christ alone. These are the 4 solas, the 4 only statements of the Reformation. And, we are Shepherd of the Desert Lutheran Church. We may call ourselves Shepherd Church in order for people to, in this non-denominational environment, not just pass us by on the road, but actually walk through our doors, check us out on a web page. But we are Shepherd of the Desert Lutheran Church, and we do intend to be theologically deep in how we understand the Bible and how we understand God's grace to us. And so it's wonderful. And I know that so many of our transplanted members from the deeply denominationally known quarters of our country, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Upper Midwest, are going to appreciate that kind of value to our classic Lutheran theology that you bring. Hey, are there, at the same time, step back for a second, we recognize that the Lutheran Church may not have our ducks in a row when it comes to digital ministry. So let me ask you this. What are those other ministries, Lutheran or otherwise, that are on your radar as we think about this new arm of our mission outreach? Who are you reading? What are you watching that's helping shape what you may be leading us to do in digital mission as our director of digital mission here at Shepherd Scottsdale?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really successful, really powerful movements, organizations, congregations, churches out there that are doing really wonderful things online. Of course, as Phoenix knows, there's churches like Hillsong out there. Of course, worldwide organization. They are excellent at what they do, and many other non-denominational sort of Protestant groups out there that really are wonderful ministries that are doing incredible work. And where I draw the connection between this sort of traditional Lutheran thinking, this deeper theological work being done, these beliefs that we hold, it can start to get complicated, right? It can start to feel like, why are we getting lost in the weeds, getting
right.
stuck on the details? And the truth is, it's because that stuff really matters to somebody. And to have those things specified, to be able to have those talking points laid out, so you don't feel like you're the first person that's had a hard question, right? That's really cool. That's really important. And so the Lutherans have that ready to roll, right? And what I think we struggle with is packaging that and then distributing it to people that don't have those church connections. And so the other things I'm looking to, that I'm researching, that I'm looking into, are just successful digital communities that are already in existence, whether they're church organizations or not. It could be related to sports or video games or just Facebook groups. What are people talking about? How are they building relationships? And when we look to those spiritual resources, who are those churches that are being shared online? Who are the people in my own circles that are latching onto these massive, massive ministries? What about those things make them so universally applicable? And how can we learn from what they do so that the work that we are doing is particularly connective, especially for this more immediate Scottsdale area? That's a lot of the inspiration, a lot of the ongoing study, as well as a little bit more research heavy, a little bit more analytical work being done by groups like the Barna organization. They've put out some really wonderful things, not only describing the challenging situation we find ourselves in as a culture shifts from church-centric to church indifferent or anti-church. I would say that transition has already taken place and it's only increasing. But also they put out some resources saying, here are some opportunities where we can connect with people, whether it's through these intergenerational relationships or just learning the terminology that people are using today. I think the joy of all of this really for me is we really believe this stuff that we're talking about on Sundays, right, in church. And we really take to heart the fact that God wants to be involved in our lives in a personal way and to walk with us, as Jesus walked on this earth. So he wants to walk with us in our lives. How do we communicate that to somebody who has no idea that that's what God wants to do because they've just never been exposed to it?
Yeah. Love it. And just as you're talking, I'm reminded that, as you come on board, you don't live on an island, John. what we are able to entertain as possible ministry pathways in the future, with you in a place of leadership, is due in large part because we've got leaders here like a Matt McLean, like a Jen Hodges, who through their digital production and graphic design really help us put together a product, a resource online that is attractive for people, that is efficient, and not only that, but actually it's consequential. It gets the job done. And your job is not just about putting stuff out there, and like Netflix or Hulu or Peacock or Disney Plus, we're not just flooding the airwaves with stuff, but part of your responsibility is also to help people, especially here regionally, get connected with us analogically, in an analog way. It's one thing to watch something on a screen or listen to it on a podcast, and as soon as it's over, you're on to your next compartmentalized piece of life. It's another thing to say, that's not the totality of what God wants for us. God also wants us to connect with other flesh and blood human beings. Physical interaction matters to God. He made us with bodies physically to be in proximity to other human beings. So, as we wrap up today, just talk a little bit about that. What do you see as some things to consider making that connection between the digital world, which is anonymous and isolated, and the analog world, which is connected, physically proximal? Just talk a little bit about that part of your job as you anticipated. No strings attached. You can change your mind tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. My mind is kind of racing with all these different opportunities that do already exist, in the world. That how many digital communities are we a part of that we have some physical connection with, and how many are we a part of that we have no connection with, and what can we do to sort of bridge that gap with this digital project, with this outreach digital mission project? How can we cross that bridge into it being an opportunity for people to be part of a community where they're forming real connections? And particularly, I think, you guys had flown me in December for a visit to do some interviews, some meetings, to do some brainstorming and really see how things were going, see how the chemistry fit was. And I really, really enjoyed meeting the team, getting to know the staff, being a part of some of those meetings more recently, and getting to see just how much of a unified effort there is at the furthering of the kingdom. It's not just trying to keep Shepherd's doors open or trying to make sure everyone within the congregation is having a positive spiritual experience, but it actually is this outward focus of this is now a team, a family that is geared up and working towards shining the light of Christ in the lives of the people that don't know about it yet. And so, Matt McLean and I have had a couple of conversations, and it's just been exciting to think about the different productions we can do, the different sorts of opportunities we have in putting together resources for people to view sort of statically, something they can just access anytime and watch some videos. But then how do we create that opportunity for a connection to be made, whether it be through instant messaging, whether it be through video calls, whether it be through physical gatherings? Like you said, God created us to be part of a community, ultimately the community of his body. But more immediately, how can we fulfill that need in the Scottsdale area? And honestly, as I've described this position, as I've talked about it with family and friends, oftentimes they ask, oh, you're going to be doing digital ministry for Shepherd. Are they going to, are you just going to do that from Wisconsin? And of course, no way.
Yeah.
But, but the question is, why is this digital ministry needing to be geographically contained? Why does it need to be so specific? And the truth is, there's real people behind the screens that we're trying to connect with, right? And we are in a position of much more faithfulness to be connecting with the people more immediately surrounding us. That's the culture we know. That's the communities we're a part of. That's who we interact with on a daily basis, whether it's passing them in the grocery store or sitting next to them in church. And so that's what I really have joy and hope in as we move forward is where does that connection lie and how can we really capitalize on it and welcome more more people into the family of God.
I love it. You know, here at Shepherd, and John knows this by way of the interview, but just to underscore for our Shepherd family, you know, digital ministry is not just putting out products, as John was saying, but it is about engaging with our Scottsdale community. My marching orders as the lead pastor here from our board of directors and therefore from our congregation is mission to Scottsdale, Phoenix is our first priority. And so as I've talked with the board of directors, you know, if you're from Phoenix, if you're from Scottsdale, I've said there's a mission window that we are laser focused on. East of Route 51 in Phoenix, west of Route 87, Arizona 87 here in Phoenix, south of Happy Valley Road, and north of Camelback Road. That little square is, gives you about 5 miles all around Shepherd. It's about 5 miles in any direction to any corner. And the idea is we can do that really well. And so that's our question. That's John's question. It's my question is, how do we support where our Shepherd family most predominantly comes from? Well, that's that, with an eye toward the fact that we have winter guests that live still, and maybe even this year, sadly, you know, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, out east in New Jersey. Hello, New Jersey fans of Shepherd. But we've got folks that are winter guests that live nationally. Some live globally. Hello, Canadians, right? And so we want to be aware that we're not just a local and regional church. We are a national and in some ways a global church. But at the same time, we have to have our eyes on something, because as one person has said, if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. John, I'm just want to wrap up today by saying on behalf of our congregation, we are really glad that you're coming to help us aim at something. And the beauty is we don't know exactly how God's going to work this out. We don't know exactly how this pandemic is going to wind itself down. We don't know anything absolutely certain about the future, but we do know that as long as we take faithfully what God is offering us in the moment, God will never let us fail. God never leaves his church without the resources it needs in order to accomplish the ministry that is right before its nose. And I'm just so glad on behalf of our Shepherd staff and congregation that you are one of those resources that God has placed before us, and we're glad to receive you. Hey, any final thoughts before I let you get back out into the 20-degree cold of Wisconsin?
Well, I don't plan on going out into the cold, but just want to say thank you, and that I'm really excited to be a part of this ministry, part of this project. I think it's going to be really amazing to see what happens, what God does with us as we try our best to be his faithful instruments, and it's going to be a blessing. So looking forward to getting to know the Shepherd family in person a little bit more, on a little bit more personal level. But as time moves forward, you know, the opportunities to do that will arise. But in the meantime, yeah, God bless you all, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, John. John will actually be moving down here over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll see him the last couple of weekends, both at our Shea and Mountain View in-person campus services, introducing him there so you can get to know him. Probably a meet and greet also here at Shepherd as we move into February. But we're glad to have John, glad to have you as a Shepherd family. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, thanks a lot for being part of our Shepherd family, even at a distance, even if it's not in person during these COVID days. We still want to be here for you. Make sure that you go to our website. If you've got prayer requests, if you need to talk to somebody, if you are lonely and you just need some encouragement, we've got members and staff that would be glad to respond and reach out to you and just touch base and pray. Hey, and last thing, as always, as you have opportunity, again, remember to support us financially here at Shepherd. This digital ministry is not expensive, but it's not cheap either. And we want to do right by God by inviting more and more folks to support financially this digital mission of our congregation. Anything that you give at our shepherdaz.church website is tax deductible, and we'd be glad to receive it and put it to good use. Hey, this is Pastor Scott Seidler. Thanks again for joining us for this Shepherd podcast. I look forward to seeing you again soon.